Hello and welcome to the Leap Forward podcast. This is the show where we explore the leaders and the ideas and the innovations shaping the world of work, skills, and industry transformation. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by someone absolutely leading at the center of one of the most important transitions in modern industry, I think, really, and that's the transformation of mobility and the workforce that powers it. And Nick Connor is the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of the Motor Industry, which is the professional body and an authoritative voice for people working across the retail motor sector. Before that, Nick, you held senior leadership roles across major automotive brands, including being the global CEO of Polestar. And before that, senior roles at Volvo. And you've worked across the world as well. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm really, really delighted to be here. Yeah.
So, let's kick it off. For listeners that may not know you personally, how would you describe what you're focused on right now as CEO of the IMI and what excites you most about the role?
So I joined the IMI back at the end of the summer last year. So I'm about 5 months in now. In fact, I think this is my fifth month anniversary as it happens.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Perfect time to be on a podcast.
Absolutely perfect timing. It's a really amazing institution. I mean, it's been around for 105 years. In fact, this will be our 106th year this year. As you say, it's the professional body for the motor industry, not just in the UK, but also globally. We have members all around the world, and we do training and awarding literally all around the world, from here, Australia, Asia, whatever. So it's a very long established, but also a very dynamic organisation, which is trying to address the very rapid changes that we see in the motor industry, not just here, but around the world, as I say.
Well, it's great that you've sort of set me up there perfectly because, you said when I think you joined the IMI, that you were joining, at a time that was a critical point for the industry. So, from your perspective, what makes this moment so different?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we are at a turning point. I really believe we're at a turning point for the industry. We've got obviously electrification, which we've been talking about now I've been talking about for 10 years and longer in the wider industry, and that's really starting to gain momentum. We've got self-driving cars. We've got advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS. We've got AI technology coming into the car supporting those systems. So powertrains are changing. The way we use our cars are changing. The environmental pressures on our cars and vehicles generally are changing. So it really is a sort of tipping point, both in terms of technology and I think in consumer perspective of the industry.
And of course, you've got all of these other sort of geopolitical, supply chain, market kind of transformations and transitions going on around those things.
Yeah, we do. So, here in the UK, we see new entrant brands coming in pretty much every month. So a new brand every month, I think this year in 2026, We've obviously seen a number of new entrants over the last few years. That's great for consumers. It increases consumer choice. It's challenging for legacy automakers who are facing stiffer competition. New brands that are competing from a much lower starting price point. So it's a fascinating time for the industry, and the technology is changing, and we're trying to persuade people that they should consider alternative powertrains with and without incentives. So it's an interesting time, and you've got the skills that are required to help make that transformation within the industry. So we need people who can work on ADAS systems. We need people who can understand autonomous driving systems. We need people who are software engineers rather than the traditional technicians. But you also need the traditional technicians to work on the cars for the next 20, 30 years, because they're not going to disappear off our road. So we've got the new and the old working alongside each other for many, many years to come.
It's really interesting. You talk about those kind of parallel sort of, kind of paths, tracks, whatever, sort of, alongside it. And obviously, that shift and that you've sort of described, I suppose, in that critical point, where when you look at the sort of the workforce, where do you see the biggest sort of skill pressures sit?
The skill pressures are predominantly in the workshop.
Yeah.
So traditional technicians, we have a skill shortage. We can debate how quickly that skill shortage accelerates depending on how quickly those people who are getting older retire. It has historically been quite difficult to attract apprentices to the motor industry. Not everyone's enthusiastic. I think there's a lot of misconception about what it means to work in a motor dealership, in a repair shop. We've got skill shortages in body shops in particular, and that's a highly skilled area of accident repair. So we've got that, and we've got the new skills that are required to work on the software and the ADAS systems that the cars have. So it's coming at us from two fronts. Of traditional workshop technicians are getting older, and we need to replace them. So we need to find a way to attract new people to the industry to come in and be there for the future.
Well, I think I'm really looking forward to kind of talking more about kind of what you and the IMI are sort of I guess, focusing on and doing about some of those challenges and also opportunities. But before we do that, as I said at the beginning, you've had this fascinating kind of role, a qualified lawyer, I think, as well, right? And then obviously working in leadership. I mean, and what I think joining, Volvo obviously first, and then Polestar, you said, I think, you started there when it was sort of something along 20 people, and now, wow. When you look back, I suppose, and we don't often get the chance to do that, I suppose, but when you do, what are some of the pivotal moments in your journey that really shaped your leadership approach?
Well, I think for me, it was about taking opportunities as and when they arose.
Yeah.
I can't say that I had a grand career plan when I was, 21 years old to end up working in the automotive industry. I was a newly qualified solicitor, went to law school, worked in London for a few years, qualified here. And then almost by chance, I fell into automotive because I had a client that was an overseas client that was acquiring a UK PLC that happened to be a motor distribution group, and I went in-house to work for them for a couple of years to sort of sort things out. And then I just fell in love with the industry. So it was literally, I went from being a traditional lawyer doing transaction work to working in-house for an organisation and thought, actually, this industry really appeals to me. I like the people, I like the product, I like the excitement of the industry. I mean, it really is. There's constant change, and there has been, for many years. So I got excited about the industry, moved in-house, went to Volvo as a lawyer, and then over time, what I found was I was doing more and more non-legal work. I was giving more commercial type advice than pure legal advice, and someone very bravely called my bluff and said, if you think you're so smart, why don't you have a go yourself, which I did, and I've enjoyed it and not looked back since.
And having led inside OEMs, what have you, the industry itself, it's as you said, incredibly dynamic, and we can come to the kind of point around attracting talent in a minute, but certainly from the way you've set it up, it's also got huge scale. So when you're embarking upon those sorts of roles, kind of what have you learned over time about what works and what doesn't?
I mean, it's about leadership. It's about setting direction, about agreeing a sense of direction for people so that everyone's headed to the same place in the same way. It's about building trust with people. I don't believe in micromanaging a team. I think you get good people around you recruit the right people, you agree a direction, and you do everything you need to do to support pursuing that direction and driving the business forward. And business is made up of lots of little steps that lead to momentum. So I'm a big believer in focusing on today, focus on what we need to do today to drive for the future. Don't get too obsessed about the long-term view. You need to have it, but actually what makes it work is just doing the stuff right today.
I like that. And if you could if you had like a sentence to define your kind of leadership style?
I would say that I am enthusiastic, supportive. I don't micromanage my team. I'm very focused on getting the right people around me. Selecting the right people is absolutely critical, and then giving them the authority and the powers that they need to deliver. And actually making sure they have fun doing it. And we all make mistakes. We should make mistakes. I really don't like blame cultures. I like an environment where people feel comfortable to try stuff, and if it doesn't work, they come to me, we discuss it, we understand why, we learn, we move on.
Let's talk about the IMI.
Hmm.
So it's a pretty unique organization, as you sort of described.
Yeah.
I mean, the global nature of it is of real interest to me as well. And you've got that kind of professional body and sort of sector voice kind of dynamic
Yes.
going on. How would you kind of describe the IMI's mission in a nutshell? And where do you want to take it over the next few years?
Well, we are a members organisation first and foremost. We are the professional body for the automotive industry in the UK and actually globally as well. And we're the authoritative voice for the industry, certainly in the UK and in other parts of the world as well. So for me, it's about doing the best job we possibly can to make sure that the people that work in the industry have the skills, the qualifications, the recognition, and the pathway to develop to meet the needs of the market.
And when you think about that mission, um, in terms of where you want to take it, where are we on that journey? And what is it we need to do to accelerate that that move?
Well, we're 105 years in.
Yeah.
So we're part way there. I hope we can do another 105 years. That's my
Under your leadership.
Well, yeah, that would be quite an achievement, wouldn't it? But I think we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
It isn't about quick wins. It's about long wins. It's about people have career paths that last 40, 50, 60 years. So we want to set people up for those long-term career paths, for that development that they need to take over time. So for me, it's about identifying where the industry is today, where it's going over the next certainly 10, 20, 30 years, and then making sure that we give people the skills, the qualification, the recognition to actually be able to develop their career during that time period and say meet the needs of the industry.
And when we first sort of talked about the critical point we're at, you rattled off a whole series of really exciting kind of dynamic things that are going on in this industry. If you sort of didn't know that you were running IMI, you might think that you were the CEO of a tech business, right? But we also talked about sort of, the perception of the industry itself for talent.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about kind of, where we are on the perception of the industry and, our ability to attract talent or not, and what we're going to do about that.
Yeah, I think that the industry perception is a long way away from reality, in my view. If you visit an OEM dealer's workshop, I mean, they're fantastic. They're clean. You'll see everyone has a computer. I mean, there's a lot of diagnostic work. Where the traditional view would be of something entirely different. It would be an under the arches garage with oil everywhere, a mess. And it's just not like that anymore. So I think we still have a job to do. And I know that we've been talking about this as an organisation for a long time about what the industry really means, what it's really like to work in an automotive dealership, and to explain to people the career pathways that are available going in as an apprentice, 16, 17, 18 years, qualifying as a technician, and the career paths that gives people for the rest of their lives. So, and I think we're helped by the technology change, because it's much easier to explain to people why things are changing when you talk about the technology that's in the cars. When you sit in a car and you see the large iPad type screens, you see the sensors at the top of the car, you see the LiDAR, you see the lasers, etc. It starts to explain that this is not the way it used to be. Cars look, feel, drive very differently from how they did even 10 years ago. So I think we're helped with the technology helps us to explain to people that a new skill set is required to look after these vehicles properly for the longer term.
And you talked about sort of the IMI, kind of operating globally. Tell me a little bit about sort of the kind of, I suppose, the sort of the international kind of dynamics that are at play inside the organisation and your mission.
Yeah, so I mean, our focus is predominantly the UK.
Yep.
So I mean, 90% of our revenue is generated here in the UK, and I actually think we've got an opportunity to grow significantly within the UK. There are opportunities we've identified over the last few months where we can fill some gaps in the market. And I think certainly with the new technology that's available to us, we can be much more proactive in how we meet the market needs. Internationally, we're successful because people recognise us as a leading UK institution, and that still has credibility in certain parts of the world. So in the Middle East, in Asia, people come to us because if you have an IMI qualification, it means you meet, a high standard. You've been through a thorough process. You've been properly awarded whatever qualifications you have. So the work we do in the UK is gives us credibility to expand overseas. We are putting focus on that. We are working on that, but I would say it's probably proportionate to the revenue that we have. So 90% of our focus is on the UK, 10% is overseas. And I think if the more successful we are in the UK, the more successful we will be overseas by virtue of the reputation that we have here.
And let's talk a little bit more about sort of skills and apprenticeships and the talent pipeline.
Yeah.
Sort of obviously talent is one of the defining issues in the industry. Especially in technical, as we've talked about briefly already. Give me a sense of the size of kind of the challenge and the opportunity, and what are the real kind of root causes of the skills gap today?
Yeah, I mean, there's about 800,000 people or more working within automotive in the UK. So it's a huge industry. And probably around 200,000 work within factory gates, if we can call it that.
Yeah.
So the vast majority don't work in automotive factories. They work in dealerships, they work in body shops, and the roles that are there are incredibly broad. So the IMI provides training and certification, not just for technicians, but for body shops, for management, for accountants, and so on and so forth. So it's a very broad church actually that we're addressing. The challenge, as I say, is to make people understand the breadth of the motor industry. And just as an example, I mean, we are the Institute of the Motor Industry. We also work with heavy goods vehicle manufacturers and trainers. We work on farm equipment. So it's not just about new cars or used cars. Right. It's about a much broader industrial segment than we have today. And the challenge is that we've got to get people in. We've got to get people who are attracted to the industry, understanding what it's about, and then get them qualified in a sensible timetable to start being productive. And then over time, careers last a long time. Developments are there the development needs are there all the time. So we're going to be working with people basically throughout their careers, and we are already. I mean, we have 17-year-olds who are IMI members as students, all the way through to people in their later career years who have been in the industry for 30, 40 years.
Right. And still reskilling, upskilling.
And still reskilling. We were talking to people last week about AI, how to use AI for training, development. And these are people, very senior people in the industry, but they're very keen to learn new skills.
And that talent that you're looking to kind of attract, irrespective of the age, I suppose, in a sense. I mean, you've been pretty pioneering, I think, really, as an industry and as an association, in terms of apprenticeships. What are you seeing in terms of that sort of that kind of pathway? What are the challenges, opportunities? What are the barriers that sort of that we need to kind of overcome?
Yeah, I think apprenticeships are gaining popularity.
Yeah,
and particularly in recent years, I think the push for university-only education has obviously been there for 20 years and has been very successful, and it's great that so many young people have got into higher and further education. But it isn't the only route, and I think the government today is recognising that and saying to people, there are other career paths, one of which is apprenticeships, which can give you, a lifelong career. You don't have the student debt that you would have if you went to university. You're, earning pretty much from day one, and you're gaining skills from day one. And at the end of an apprenticeship, you're eminently employable, which isn't necessarily the case after a 3 or 4 year degree, unfortunately.
I would absolutely agree with you. And, I think when you're looking at sort of, graduate kind of unemployment rates, I think comparing that to those coming out of apprenticeships in terms of being vocationally ready,
Yes.
to apply those skills. I think we're seeing that significant shift, aren't we, in terms of the market. How are you then sort of competing for talent? Because I would imagine that sort of, someone who's going to be, a leader in the industry or is using advanced tech, they're probably being courted by the likes of Google and Meta and other tech folks. So how are you really kind of ensuring the industry is kind of, I suppose in a sense punching its weight?
Well, we're trying, and part of that is to get out to schools in particular, schools and colleges, and explain to kids, this is what the industry is about. These are the sort of career paths that you can have. So I think it's actually just explaining to people where you can go. And I think when you start to talk to people about the detailed career paths that you can go down over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, actually kids they're surprised. They're surprised that there's so much to do within the industry. The earning potential is significant at all levels of the industry now, certainly compared with graduate jobs. So it's getting easier. I think we're pushing at an open door. I think people are suddenly realizing that traditional employment opportunities are perhaps dwindling, and skills like motor trade skills are actually very much in demand. They're well paid. You work in nice conditions now. Safe conditions are very important, of course, and you've got a long-term career path that can take you from technician to management if you want to do that, or develop your technical skills still further.
How are you, as an institute, sort of, I suppose, in a sense, sort of bringing that kind of world of whether it's school, college, further education, as you mentioned, or higher education, together with industry and vocation?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is to say it's about communication. It's about telling people what the opportunities are. We are encouraging the further education colleges to go to the schools to explain what they have on offer. It's about getting businesses to invite school-age children into their business to see how things work, explain the opportunities. So it's about being proactive and actually getting out there and saying, this is what a career in the motor industry is really like. Whatever you do, whether you do a management role, whether you do a technical role, these are the range of opportunities that are available to you, and this is the sort of environment that you'll be working in. And it's not going to appeal to everybody, nor should it. But I think that the least we should do and can do is to let people know what the opportunities are. And I genuinely believe that, certainly with the technological advances, this is an incredibly rewarding career for people who want to, particularly people who have an interest in engineering. There's basically there's all sorts of career paths that you can have if you go into the automotive industry.
And granted that sort of you've said very clearly, kind of like 90% of your revenue is derived here from the UK. You have a strong presence internationally and so forth. But how does the UK sort of remain competitive in a market like this? How important is your mission to that?
I think it's critical, actually. I think the UK, is competitive. I think it can remain competitive. Obviously, we're never going to have the cheapest labour in the world, but to me, that's a race to the bottom anyway. You only have the cheapest labour for a while, and then industry moves elsewhere. You go, and we've seen that over the years.
It's a race to the bottom, right?
To Korea, to China, to Indonesia, and so on. So we're never going to win on that basis. Not as an advanced industrial society. So where we have to win is on added value, intellectual property. We've got fantastic training facilities here. We've got great universities. We've got great colleges. I think the way we compete is by being smarter and being better. Honestly, I think that's the only way we really can win in this and supply to the world the talent that it needs.
You talked about sort of advanced driver assistance systems and EV and sort of this really exciting kind of new phase and chapter that the industry's on. When we sort of talk about all of this incredible advance, what are some of the kind of the myths that sort of we're told around our readiness here?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of myths, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, particularly around EVs. I mean, there's a whole cottage industry trying to knock EVs on the head. And I mean, I love EVs, but they're not for everybody. I think we have to be open about the situations where EVs are appropriate and where they're not. So again, it's about information. It's about providing the right information to people so that they can make smart decisions. But I think EV, self-driving technology. I think it's fascinating how quickly autonomous vehicles development is suddenly accelerating. I mean, we've been saying for 20 years we're going to have autonomous vehicles, then 10 years ago, then 5 years ago, but now actually it's happening, and we're seeing EV trials all around the world, including in London this year. And I think we will start to see autonomous vehicles in the right conditions on our roads as regular practice in just a couple of years, actually. And I think that will be transformational for the industry and people's perception of it.
It's so interesting. I took my first autonomous taxi in Abu Dhabi about a month ago with my kids.
Yeah.
And I have to say that there was a driver, not that he did anything, in the front seat, as this was a trial. And my wife was in Los Angeles in the summer, and she did the same. And so it's sudden. The future has arrived, right? It's sort of it's incredible that it's gone from being a kind of hypothetical, conceptual, philosophical sort of debate to being reality. And I guess as vehicles become more software led, and we talked about the kind of who you're competing with in a sense for talent. What does that mean for the role of a technician and the skills that they'll need?
It's completely different. It's obviously completely different. You become a software engineer. You become someone who diagnoses all faults basically using a laptop rather than anything else. And you become you have to be incredibly familiar with the technology that supports the AI, whether it be LiDAR or radars or cameras or whatever the particular vehicle uses. So it's a very, very different skill set. And as I intimated earlier, I think that's one of the things that helps us persuade people that this is not the career that people imagined 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And when we've talked quite a lot about sort of obviously the industry side of things, and quite rightly, obviously, but I'm kind of interested to get your kind of perspective on the consumer, the buyers of these vehicles. Kind of how has that changed, and where do you see the kind of the critical point, in that regard?
Yeah, it's a hard place to be, being a consumer in the automotive industry at this moment in time, because you get so many competing stories coming at you. Should I buy an EV? Should I not buy an EV? Should I buy a plug-in hybrid? Should I buy a mild hybrid? I think people have pretty much given up on diesels, if you believe the statistics now, 5%, I think, in the UK now. So there's lots of choices to be made by consumers, and there are many more brands to choose from than there were even 5 years ago. So it's a little bewildering for consumers, but also choice should be good. It can be good. And I think as an industry, as an automotive industry, we have a job to do in terms of helping people make the right decision for them. And there's no one right answer that suits everybody. But I think we have a responsibility to make sure that people go into the products and services that suit them. And I'm convinced that the technology is advancing so rapidly that it won't be very long until those decision-making processes become easier. I saw the other day that I think in Norway now something like 98% of cars are now EVs, and now there have been huge incentives there that have helped drive the decision-making, and we have some very strong incentives in the UK for EVs, particularly for company car drivers, but not for retail drivers. So I think that's something that we need to work with the government on to help persuade the government that more incentives are needed to encourage people to make the switch, if that's what the government genuinely wants to happen.
We've talked quite a lot about technology and its role in the industry today, but I wanted to kind of join that up with training. And how are you, as the IMI, embracing tech to help you deliver that training at scale and with the right outcomes?
Yeah, there are huge opportunities here, and I don't think we have as fully embraced AI as we might have done. We are working very hard and very fast on using AI to help develop the products for the market. I mean, we have a vast array of training products and certifications that are out there, probably too many. And one of the challenges we face is as a relatively small organization, developing new products fast enough is always a challenge. So we get a lot more requests for products than we can fulfill. And I think, sensibly used AI is a fantastic tool for us to more rapidly and efficiently develop products that meet the market. The critical bit is that we supervise the AI.
Yeah.
We don't get these false these false outputs that we hear such a lot about. So it's critical that we maintain the quality. But I think we can definitely use AI to speed up the processes that we have internally to develop solutions.
And touching a little bit sort of around something that, again, I know is very close to your heart, which is, inclusion, and you talked about sort of your talent diversity already, as part of this conversation. And you've spoken about sort of, inclusive change in the public kind of domain. How important is that sort of, diverse leadership culture in solving and realizing, I suppose, the workforce challenge and opportunity?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in diversity driving results, actually. And I think it's good for of its own, but I think actually what diversity does is it creates differences of opinion internally. Certainly, if you listen
Yeah.
and you use that diversity of views and opinions and experience to drive business. I mean, we are as an organisation, we're talking to lots of people at lots of different levels of the industry. I think the more diverse our workforce is and the more diverse the inputs we have, the better chance we have of serving the industry. So it's something that I think it's right to do anyway, but actually from a commercial perspective, it's absolutely right to do because it makes us better at delivering what we need to deliver for the industry.
And as someone who has worked on global businesses and IMI itself, obviously being a truly international business, what is it you think that sort of we can learn from the rest of the world as the UK?
Yeah. I think you learn something from wherever you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate to work, UK, Sweden, Australia, all around Asia. Have lived in a number of these countries, and every country does some things differently. Not everything differently. I mean, there's more commonality than there is difference. But what I've seen over the years is that some countries do some things better than others, and we should pick and mix what works, what we can see works, and apply it centrally as much as we can. And it does differ from country to country. I mean, I did a lot of work in Japan over the years, and I love the efficiency, I love the politeness, I love the way that they deal with customers. I mean, their customer service is absolutely second to none. And I think we can learn from that. You can't take it 100% and transpose it to the UK because it feels weird.
Yeah.
But you can definitely learn some of the tricks that are used there and apply them here.
And if you were given a wish to wave a magic wand across kind of the sector, on the journey you're on now, to make something happen at scale, with that, what would it be?
For me, it would be about creating the understanding of the industry. I mean, genuinely, I don't think we need to change all that much. I think actually the industry does lots of things super well. I think what we haven't done so well is actually explaining to the world, one, how complex what we do is. I mean, it's a phenomenally complex industry, how exciting it is, and to really create that sense of excitement and passion in people that don't yet work in the industry, and give them the opportunity to consider what it is you can do within it, and the tools that we have available to help people build a really, really rewarding lifelong career.
Yeah. It feels like to me that we need a nationwide campaign, to kind of really re-educate, and re-inspire people, and drive, challenge the perception of this industry,
exactly.
right? Sort of
exactly. And I have seen campaigns carried out by particular manufacturers to try and attract apprentices, particularly in Australia. I saw that. And it's effective in the short term, but I think
Yeah.
it needs a more coordinated effort.
Joined up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. More joined up effort. And I think, particularly with the government now saying to people, it's not all about going to university. I think this is
You're right.
the point at which we can say, look, the government's right. There are
Mhm.
lots of other options. One of those options is working in automotive, and this is the vast array of things that you can do if you come and work in automotive. And this is the fun that you will have, and the incredibly rewarding career you will have if you do it.
I'm going to ask you a few quick fire
Of
questions,
course,
if
yeah,
that's all right,
yeah.
just for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
So if you could instantly download any skill into your brain, what would it be?
It have to be languages. So I having lived and worked around the world, I spent years trying to grasp new languages, whether it would be Mandarin, French, Japanese, whatever, and I'm incredibly bad at it. So if I could have one skill, it would be to be really adept at languages and to sort of absorb them much quicker than I actually do in reality.
And do you have a particular language you would love to learn?
I've started to learn Mandarin. I'd like to be
Wow.
really good at Mandarin, just because there's so many people to talk to in Mandarin. So.
That's a great answer. And if you could choose a dream person, alive or dead, to share a long road trip with, who would it be?
I am very interested in a chap called Lee Kuan Yew, who was the first Prime Minister of Singapore when they gained independence. He was a fascinating character, Singaporean born, of Chinese origin, and he was educated actually at the LSE and Cambridge, and basically transformed Singapore from an outpost of Malaysia into the sort of thriving meritocracy that it is today. And I would love to sit with him and say, what should we do? Any idea?
That's a great choice. I mean, what they've done there, it's just incredible.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And of course, it's only a tiny little island.
Yeah.
So it is very different from the UK. But I think the scale and the scope of the transformation is just so remarkable. And, they've got some advantages being on major shipping routes, etc. But we've got lots of advantages as well. And I feel it would be, with the right focus, I'm convinced that the UK can do better than it's doing at the moment.
And what's the one piece of future tech that you wish existed today?
Fully autonomous cars.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that is life-changing for people. The ability to take all the time that we spend in our cars, travelling to and from work, to school, whatever, and actually put that to a better use, learning a language, for example.
Yes.
I think for me that is genuinely transformational technology. One, it will be safer than human driving. Instead of jumping in my car and driving back to Oxford tonight for spending 2 hours in traffic, I could actually do something more productive than just listening to the radio. So, I think for me that we're nearly there.
Yeah.
We're almost there. So I think it's tantalizingly close. But I think that will definitely change the way we live and work.
And one step beyond automation is teleportation.
Yeah.
So if that was literally on the cards now, and you had a choice, where would you go?
I would probably go to Sydney, actually. I lived there for many years. I've got some very dear friends who live in Sydney. I love the lifestyle there. Although I read today that I used to live in Manly, and I read today that someone got bitten by a shark there this morning, which is not good. But I think it's a great city and just nice people. And it's such a long way to go by plane. But if you could teleport, well, why wouldn't you go as far as you can, really?
And as you drive back to Oxford, what's the ultimate driving song?
Ooh, I do enjoy my music. I think for me, one of my favourite songs is "Boys of Summer" by Don Henley. Roof Down, Wayfarers On. I think that's just an incredibly evocative end of summer song. So the conditions have got to be right. Probably not ideal for a wet January day in my SUV, but in a convertible in summer, that's fantastic. Yeah,
I'm there now.
Yeah.
I love it.
We love it.
Nick, It's been a brilliant conversation.
Likewise,
Thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.